you'll correct me. And she's from the Igarape Institute. I think I said that properly. Yay! Got it. And the panel's title is MRV, that moves money. Nature Tech for Credits, Compliance, and Claims. And Maria will, in essence, bring up her panelists. All the best. Let's give her a warm hand of applause.
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maria Eduarda. I work at the Igarape Institute, an independent think and do tank focused on the areas of nature, climate, and security, and its intersections. And it's a pleasure to moderate this fireside chat on a topic that is so fundamental to unlocking nature finance. That's trust. The future of carbon credits, biodiversity markets, sustainable supply chains hinges on that single word. Investors, regulators, and the whole public all need to trust that a ton of carbon is truly removed, that a hectare of forest is truly conserved, and that a biodiversity claim is real. So, for decades, however, MRV, or measurement, reporting, and verification has often been too expensive, inconsistent, and opaque. And this has undermined confidence and slowed the flow of capital to those projects that need it most. Today, the game is changing, though, from satellites to AI analytics to edge computing. New technologies are enabling this new era of nature tech. They are making it possible to generate transparent, audit-ready data, monitoring impacts constantly rather than frequently. And that technological shift is crucial for building trust in the environmental asset. And that's exactly what we are here to discuss today in this panel, how the next generation data systems can attract capital and unlock high-integrity nature markets at scale. And we have the perfect panel to explore this today. I have Tony Lent with me. Tony is the co-founder of Capital for Climate. Tony brings decades of experience as principal investors, having managed and participated in over $2 billion in investments focused on renewables, low-carbon infrastructure, and nature-based solutions. We are also joined by John Colas, a partner at Oliver Wyman, and its global head of climate and sustainability. John is leading advisor on strategy, regulation, and risk management for the financial services industry. He has been at the forefront of shaping the frameworks we all use, having worked with UNEP-FI, TCFD, implementation, and serving as a key knowledge partner to defense. So welcome. So at COP30, delivery means proof. Proof of measurability and verification, hence proof of reality. Markets can only move at the speed of trust. And trust now depends on systems that value nature with integrity. At the Igarape Institute, for example, we are working to build trust through technology as well. Not only trust in the environmental asset, but in the territory where that asset sits. Because we know that even strong projects can falter when territorial risks like governance, insecurity, land conflicts are overlooked. That's why the Green Bridge Facility, our initiative on territorial de-risking, developed the Know Your Territory platform, and a data-driven public platform that maps risks and opportunities for nature-based solutions in all municipalities of Brazil. Just as MRV systems verify that a ton of carbon is truly avoided, KYC, our platform, verifies that a territory is ready, adding a crucial layer of assurance that strengthens investors' confidence and safeguards integrity. Because ultimately, building trust in nature finance requires both knowing the asset is genuine and knowing that the territory is sound. And today we will explore how data, technology, and finance can come together to make that trust bankable. So I'll start with a question for both of you. We often hear that finance for nature is constrained not by capital, but by credibility. How can this next generation of MRV, from satellites to AI analytics, make markets more credible and hence more efficient at moving money into proven nature outcomes? So who'd like to start?
Thank you, Maria, and thank you to the World Climate Foundation for bringing us all together for this important topic. Insofar as accelerating progress and the use and the role of carbon removal, carbon credit, carbon reduction, there's no question that at the core of the issue is, as Maria outlined, is one of credibility and trust. And now we have technologies available that can complement what already exists in terms of the verification processes that have been established, but we can augment them now with technology that includes not only satellite but land-based sensors, that also includes the application of AI. And as we push ahead, particularly into a world where we really need to accelerate carbon removals, the engineered solutions will also require advanced sophistication in order to make sure the carbon that we're removing is actually being removed permanently, that there isn't leakage, that there is appropriate capture sequestration technology, and the ability to measure and monitor that will give investors supreme confidence. And I think that that issue of confidence is really at the core of developing the carbon markets. Years ago, many of you may remember that there was a lot of credibility issues with respect to carbon credits. I think we've slowly but surely been moving past that in terms of the work that the Voluntary Carbon Market Initiative has produced in terms of the standards and the definition. And I think that those ultimately will need to take hold in order to continue to give investors confidence, in order to create the demand that's necessary, in order to therefore increase the supply of removal projects that are so necessary.
Thank you, Joe. Back to Tony.
I think I'm going to take a slightly different tack on the question, which is you asked about whether or not credibility is a key impediment to capital flowing. And I think even before credibility is just basic understanding of what it is we're investing in. And I think in the nature-based solution space, there's still between, for most institutional investors, they've just heard about this, but they haven't actually seen investable pipelines, so they don't know how the different solutions, what they are, what their return profiles look like. And I think that first precondition, which is what does it mean to be doing native forest restoration, and how is that different from, say, eucalyptus plantations? What is large-scale agroforestry, and what does it mean to do large-scale restoration of degraded pasture, and what does it mean to do socio-bioeconomy when you're having smallholders and or indigenous communities collect a product that has a high value on a commodity market? I think we're still at the stage one in terms of investor education. When it comes to the next part of your question, which is, do I believe that these technologies are going to improve the ability to measure impact? I think the answer is yes. Right now, it's the Cambrian explosion of innovation in MRV technology, which is great, and that's all good. But there are some challenges, and there are also, I think, some misunderstandings or areas where investors are not quite sure what to make of this. And what I would say is, from my conversations with leading funds that are actually investing in the nature-based solution space, between the investor and the deal, there are expert consultants. And it is the expert consultants that you wind up working with that actually select your MRV technology layer. And those consultants have not yet emerged at the scale that you would expect to see in another industry. So for instance, I worked in renewables for 20 years. And in the renewable space, there are 5 or 6 world-class technical consultants, and you go to them for the equivalent of your MRV, whether it's bat surveys, noise surveys, environmental damage surveys, or in the case of solar, what are you going to do? Is your reflective index going to mess up the flight path of a migratory bird? All of those are basically MRV questions that the renewable industry has solved with decades of experience. And in this space, we just need to compress that down to 5 or 7 years. I think then the next part of the question I wanted to address is the whole notion of what we measure. And I'll just caveat this by saying I was actually trained in ecology, my first part of my career, and I would say that the one thing that is really difficult to measure is biodiversity. If you look at the other things on our list of what are the things we really need to measure? We've got carbon, we've got social benefits, we have local governance and community engagement, and we have the legal, let's call it the security and the title issue. Those are all relatively easy compared to biodiversity. For biodiversity, there's a huge amount of effort trying to develop succinct set of tools that are low cost that can give us indicators of what's a really healthy ecosystem look like. But even within the ecology community, that's not a simple question. And I don't think it's going to be answered as fast as the other ones. And I would say within 36 to 48 months, you'll see a consolidation of tool sets that makes, to your point, that makes this issue of cost no longer an impediment to actually transacting.
Amazing, thank you. And I totally agree. First, we need investor education. And to measure, first we need to understand what we are measuring. And the biodiversity challenge is huge. We cannot compare a bear in Canada to a jaguar in the Amazon. So for sure, that's a challenge. But Tony, a follow-up question. I know that Capital for Climate has been mapping investable opportunities across nature-based and climate solutions. And from your perspective, how does credible and high-frequency MRV unlock this institutional capital for these markets that we're talking about? And how can investors use MRV not just to prove compliance, as you were saying, but to de-risk and to shape investable products for nature and carbon assets?
Can I ask a clarifying question about your question? Because I always say the most important thing is the question, not the answer. What do you mean by de-risk?
Well, we have the risking of finance, for sure, guarantees, all this space, but we also have the risk of the territories, the risk of regulations. I think there's a lot of things to de-risk right now since it's an emergent market. But on your perspective, since Capital for Climate is more in the investing side of things, I would say the risk capital.
So, I would say when I look to answer this question, I look to some of the asset managers that are most sophisticated about the investment in the space. And we've been dialoguing with them, talking to their investment committees and to their chief sustainability officers about what matters to them and what they're looking at. And this question of real-time measurement hasn't come up as an issue yet. What's coming up really is, do the underlying project developers, are they compliant with the IFC standards? Are they more sophisticated than that? Are they less sophisticated than that? Do they have simple things like, do they have a really strong connection to the local environmental NGO community that's credible? In the case of Brazil, do they know, simple checklists, like do they know about map biomass? Do they know about what MRV capabilities are in the local market? These sort of simple first level questions are helpful in terms of diligencing. And I'd say, our expectation is looking at call it the middle level of investors, the investors that stand between the asset owners, the pensions, and the project developers and the ventures. I kind of expect, I'll be specific, I kind of expect firms like Patria and Just Climate and Climate Asset Management to the firms that lead the resolution of the tool sets that other investors that form funds that come after them wind up following in terms of practices and diligence and checklists.
Worth it, thank you. And Joe, back to you. Oliver Wyman consults the world's largest financial institutions on sustainability strategy and risk. Consequently, how does MRV's evolution into foundational finance infrastructure, such as enabling disclosure, verification, risk realization, valuation, how this can shape your 5-year outlook for the future first, and what governance models or standards can help align digital MRV systems with these new global norms such as TNFD and CSRD, while remaining accessible to markets and economies that lack capacity?
No, thank you, Maria. And I first off agree with Tony around we need to get the baseline right, the simple questions, the base understanding. But specifically with respect to how this can influence or affect the banking system and then ultimately the flow of capital, what I would say is a couple of things. One, all of you would certainly remember back at COP26, the financial services industry came together under the Glasgow Financial Alliance for net zero and followed that by setting ambitious net zero transition plans and net zero targets. And ultimately, for a sector as large as the financial sector to achieve net zero, there's going to have to be a role to address not only scope 1, scope 2, but scope 3 emissions. And there's been a lot of questions around how will that happen across industry, and more importantly, how will that happen with credibility? So the industry at different points in time had been criticized for greenwashing, now it's being criticized for green hushing. But I think we have to look at MRV as a way forward in terms of bringing in credibility and integrity to the reporting and disclosures, not only in financial services, but across the industry in terms of those companies that have committed to SBTI, who have targets, and who are ultimately going to need to participate in the carbon markets to bend the curve on their own emissions and in their disclosures and be able to essentially hit the targets that we all have set as part of the UN Race to Zero. And therefore, I would see the opportunity 5 years out is if there is robust, agreed set of principles measuring particularly the carbon credit, carbon removal markets and the projects that are accompanying them with the expertise of the consultants that Tony has pointed out that needs to expand and grow, then we can have true credibility in the disclosures. The disclosures that are forthcoming have been shaped and influenced by voluntary initiatives like the TNFD, but we're also seeing those being mainstreamed. Obviously, CSRD is enacted, but we're seeing the principles being adopted by other standard setters. So what the hope would be within the 5-year horizon that Maria spoke about is that we would have true integrity in terms of auditable, standardized, transparent, and frequent standards that would go into the disclosures and show real progress in companies' targets and delivery toward net zero.
Thank you. Yeah. The construction of standards, it's very important. I'm seeing this in the restoration economy. Since it's an emergent market, we know that is the most cost-effective and scalable climate solution available today, but we need to build the standards to make that scale. So that's very, very important. And to finalize our fireside chat, I just wanted to ask a question for both of you to respond quickly. What will have to happen in technology, policy, and finance for trust in nature's realities, since we are talking about MRV and we're talking about proof of things, to become meaningful capital flow? So how can the private sector, the financial sector, really have the trust to move the money where it's most needed right now in the climate and nature realm?
I'm going to go back to my original controversial statement, which is, I think to move significant capital, it's less about MRV and more about being able to translate these new solution sets into the language of finance. And the language of finance is fundamentally, what's your rate of return how does the solution relate to other asset classes that I've been involved with in the past? And if I'm sure you heard this conversation today and probably yesterday, and also if you've been in the Blue Zone, there's a lot of conversation about are we taking the core nature-based solutions and are we placing them fundamentally in relation to the infrastructure asset classes and long-term offtakes? Are we placing them closer to real assets, which is the province of agricultural investing? I think I'm far less concerned about the underlying business models than I am about just that translational story. The only area where I would differ, and I'd go back around to this whole notion of how are we doing risk management, is in the credit markets. And in the credit markets, I actually think that real-time remote monitoring is going to be a huge boon to the green bond market and to making the sustainability bond market a lot more manageable and being able to make things like outcome bonds really sensitive to changes in underlying practices on the ground. And so I think from that, anybody that's in this space that's putting money to work should be pretty excited about that evolution, because I think it's going to that's going to open up really significant capital flows.
Great. Yeah, this translations of roles it's very important. I said it's an emergent market and we are all learning how to do it right. But we need to start with credibility and integrity.
Yeah, no, I think just to add to the points, there's no question that markets function with greater transparency, regulated, well-understood standards, and a educated investor base. And so those are all prerequisites, as it were. But at the same time, we also need to make sure that public policy moves us in this direction. So the national adaptation plans that are being developed speak specifically to greenhouse gas reductions. So we need to translate and cascade those down into actual policy that affects the real economy in terms of business choices and strategy, and that we also provide standards and backstops to promote a carbon market. You've heard a lot this week about Article 6. There's lots still to be done in building that interoperability, but we're seeing real progress in the advent and advances in the carbon markets, and we would continue to advocate the development of those markets, particularly in the hard-to-abate internationally traded sectors like steel, like shipping, like aviation. And if we converge closer to international prices on carbon, we also believe that will provide more credibility and depth to the market, and it will also inform investors on the pro forma economics and ROIs of investments in such large-scale programs.
Perfect, thank you. I know we had a lot of food for thought, but our fireside chat is really quick, but we can continue this conversation another time. Thank you both for participating, and that's it.
Wonderful.